Hi everyone, welcome to another Freedom Property podcast. I'm delighted today to have on Paul Cummins, aka the UK Property Man. Paul, welcome onto the podcast.
Thanks, Kessler. It's really good to chat to you today.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Just a background on me and Paul. So we run a property event in Dundee together. But I thought it'd be great to get him on the show. He's a full-time property investor, so it'll be interesting to kind of pick his brain on his background and why he invests in property. So, Paul, for those that maybe don't know you already or don't know that much about your background, it'd be interesting to get a background on you and how you sort of transitioned into property.
Yeah, sure. So I my background is in engineering. I actually started my career in motorsport, designing and building race cars and rally cars, and that's what I wanted to do. But then, when the recession in 2008 happened, a lot of motorsport people stopped paying other people to build their cars for them. So that industry kind of collapsed. And that's when I decided to go and get a real job, inverted commas. Um, and I got a job in Aberdeen because I studied in Scotland. I did my degree in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Um, and I got a job in Aberdeen in the oil and gas industry through my university. Actually, it was like a recruitment thing they were doing. I didn't even know what oil and gas was. I didn't even know there was an industry in Aberdeen. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. It was just something that came about, and I went for it. So I spent 10 years in Aberdeen working in the oil and gas industry. And because my plan was to ride out the recession for, a year or two, and then motorsport would get back to where it was. But obviously that never happened. Um, and it's an industry that pays very well. So the golden handcuffs were on, and it's hard to get out of them once they're on. But then in 2014-15, the oil and gas price fell, and Aberdeen's very insular. So like 2008 didn't affect Aberdeen at all,
No.
which is why I got a job there, because there wasn't a lot of jobs anywhere else. But when the oil price falls, Aberdeen has a recession, and that's what happened in 2015. And it was literally like first day back after Christmas, right? We're just closing down the whole department type thing. Um, and that's when I kind of realized how vulnerable I was in a job and having one source of income and all that stuff. I was working very, very hard in my job. I was very passionate about what I did, and it kind of devastated me to, suddenly just have no job.
Yeah.
Um, so it was actually I was quite fortunate because it was quite early when the oil price dropped. It was a new business, and they kind of panicked and pulled the plug. So I had time to find another job before the real recession kicked in. Um, so I managed to get an engineering job, which lasted about a year. And in that year, I had already decided I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. I started reading loads of books and listening to people on the internet and all that type of stuff, personal development stuff, and different businesses. And I knew I wanted to do something for myself,
Okay.
but I really had no idea what that was. Um, so I just took the year to kind of explore and investigate different things and speak to different people. And I did what was called a 360, I don't know, survey, I suppose. And I spoke to people that were all around me. So people I went to university with, people that I was friends with, people that were my boss, people that were my colleagues. And I asked them what I'm good at, like what my strengths are, because your strengths are something that you don't actually know you're good at because they come so naturally to you.
Yeah, true.
Um, and I tried different types of businesses as well. I tried to rent out motorsport equipment. It was a disaster. Did no market research. There was new regulations came in for like neck support devices for the drivers and co-drivers. And I bought a ton of them, but I never bought any helmets to go with them. So the guys wanted a helmet and a device. So I didn't have that, so that was a disaster. I just tried various different things, and once I kind of started looking at property, I realized that the strengths I had were very aligned to property, and the engineering background was very aligned to property, like that analytical process and no emotion in making judgments and decisions and deals and stuff like that. And I started to explore that, and the more I explored that, the more I realized I really, really enjoy this. I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah.
Um, I actually once upon a time did a degree in civil engineering. Mechanical was actually my second degree. So I kind of had some kind of background knowledge as well. But really, once I made that decision, because of kind of where I was in my life at that point, I was very institutionalized. You know what I mean? I only ever had a job. I knew I needed a massive kick in the backside, and just getting into property would never work for me. I had to actually jump off the cliff, and that whole cliched saying, like an entrepreneur jumps off a cliff and figures out how to build the plane on the way down. Like that's literally what
Yeah.
I had to do, and that's what I did. And I wouldn't have done it any other way. I had enough self awareness to know that's what I needed to do. So I did, and it was really hard. I wouldn't recommend that approach to anybody. But that's kind of what I did. And it was a tricky process, but I got there in the end. Ended up working for like a refurb business and getting loads of really good experience of refurbs and costing refurbs and stuff like that. And one thing led to another, and that was 2015, yeah. And here we are now, full time property investor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously you're still here, so proofs in the pudding it's worked for you. But you said you maybe don't recommend other people do that. So what sort of challenges did you have along the way, and maybe just kind of a brief timeline of sort of 2015 to kind of where you are now in regards to property investment?
I suppose 2015 to 2017 was those 2 years were really tough, like, and it really tested my character. And so, like, I left Aberdeen on the back of a recession, and I saw how volatile the property market was in Aberdeen, because the oil and gas industry is very short-sighted. They make money today and they fire everybody tomorrow, and they don't really think about the third day. Oh, we've got another project. Let's hire everyone back. Like that's how it works.
Right.
So like Aberdeen was devastated in 2015. A lot of people left. Jobs were hard to get, but they're also hard to get in other parts of Scotland because so many people left Aberdeen.
Yeah.
So I decided I was never going to buy investment property in Aberdeen, and I had done loads of research, and around Glasgow and Lanarkshire was the area that I picked just because the numbers worked best. Those different towns that are close together, so there's a good volume of stock. It's a very stable, non-volatile market. So when I lost my job, I was in a relationship that kind of ended around the same time. I literally just said, right, if I don't do this now, it's literally never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I literally packed my car and headed to Glasgow and didn't really know what I was going to do next, which effectively made me homeless. So like I literally was living out in my car. I had some friends that lived in the area, so I was able to stay with them here and there, and I had some very close friends that I could basically sleep in their spare room whenever I needed it. But I could have went home to Ireland. I could have done that. It would have been an easier option. I could have went to like Newcastle because there's an oil and gas industry there, and a headhunter that moved me about a few times in jobs would have got me a job in Newcastle the next week. He said he would even give me a job as a recruiter. We had a good
Right.
relationship, like, and he saw that I was fairly good at what I did. But I had made the decision that I wanted to do property and I wanted to do it in the Lanarkshire area.
Yep.
So committing to that basically kept me homeless for a year. And I know it sounds weird to say like I chose to be homeless, but it was a big test of my character to make that happen. And there was a few times where I was like, oh, I'll just go to Newcastle. This is too hard now. And like I was trying to get really basic jobs. Like I dulled down my CV. I was trying to get jobs driving vans in Tesco and driving vans in Asda, and I wasn't getting them. Like,
Well.
and it was really, really frustrating. And like it was getting to the point where I was buying weekly shopping on credit cards and stuff. Like it was getting tight. Um, but then I had a chat with myself. I was like, no, you've decided to do this. This is kind of the reason you've jumped off the cliff type thing, to force you to make it work. And that's what I did. And then in October 2017, I met that guy that had the refurb business, started working with him, and then just one thing started leading to another. And he became my first sourcing client. I was project managing refurbs. I got tons of experience there. Like I refurbed nearly 50 properties for other people,
Wow.
and you see patterns of what's working, what's not working. Um, so it was tough, but then what came off the back of it, of that resilience, and even now, I know this is kind of a different topic now, but like that period has made me so much stronger now. There's very little that phases me, to be honest. And even I speak directly to vendors a lot that want to sell their property, and because I kind of experience that little bit of hard times, like when I'm speaking to a vendor and they've got an issue, there's no judgment from me at all because
Yeah.
I'm in no position to judge anybody, and that works really well for me. I've even had a guy last year. We ended up buying his property, which solved the problem for him, and it took ages because of various different things that he had to have a certain timeline. And at the end of it, he didn't say thanks for buying my property. He didn't say thanks for solving my problem. He said thanks for not judging me. Like
Wow.
that's the thing he appreciated more than anything. So even though it was a tough time, the lessons I've learned from that, and even just my own resilience and sticking to a goal, and even though my approach changed several times, like actually achieving that is means a lot, and I kind of I carry that around with me now. Yeah,
Yeah, no, amazing. No, that's good. Fantastic to hear there. Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of stuck through it all the way through.
yeah.
So good on you. Um, and then how did the first property come about? Did you have funds saved up, or how did you manage to buy your first one?
No, like I said, I was going to Aldi with a credit card, so I
Yeah,
had no
exactly.
money at all. I hadn't a penny. Um, so I did property training at the start as well. In 2015, I went to a company in London, and for 2.5 years did a lot of training. And part of that training was, as well as property strategies, like there's buy to lets, there's flips, there's HMOs, all that kind of stuff. They introduced me to the concept of using private investors to fund deals,
Yep.
and that was a very alien concept to me. But obviously now I know that that's actually how a lot of business is funded.
Yeah.
Banks, hedge funds, all these things is all private money. And people who have money, even when I was an engineer, those people invested in stocks and shares and different things. I was so focused on work, I never took an interest in that. Um, so for my first deal, I found private finance, and I've just done that ever since. Everything I've done is being funded by private investors.
Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah, and how have you found that sort of process and in attracting investors?
Again, it was a big mindset shift for me. Um, Back at the start, I suppose I wasn't financially educated. Even though I was earning really good money as an engineer, I never kept very much of it. I don't, it wasn't even like I had a lavish lifestyle or anything. It just didn't have. I wasn't smart with money at all. Um, so at the start, I almost felt like I was asking for money, like I was asking
Mm,
someone for money.
yeah.
But once I did it once, and like gave the guy back his money and gave him back 3 or 4 grand, which was profit for him. He was just like, "This is unbelievable. I want to do this again." So like my first investor still invests now, like
Amazing.
like long term contracts, 5 years at a time type thing. Um, but like it's just once you've got a track record of making people money, you know what I mean? Like people ask me now, can they invest with me, as opposed to me having to go and raise finance. Because
Yeah.
it's so hard. I mean, even for me trying to figure out stocks and shares and how it works, I find it really complicated. So I just stay away from it. Whereas, if someone knows you and trusts you and you roll the dice with them once and it works, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
once the trust is there, then yeah, raising finance is quite easy.
Yeah, good to hear. So yeah, so you mentioned kind of like Aberdeen as well. That's kind of interesting. You decided not to invest in Aberdeen because of the volatility. Have you been swayed back recently? With the way property prices are just now?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I live in Aberdeen, so obviously I moved to Lanarkshire to start the business. But then a year later started dating a girl from Aberdeen. So my partner is from Aberdeen. Um, and the plan was kind of for her to eventually move down to Lanarkshire. But 2 years ago we had a baby.
Hi,
Um,
congratulations.
Thank you. And all the babysitters live in Aberdeen, like her family are all based in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
So I've actually moved back to Aberdeen. So it's a bit strange. I live in Aberdeen, but I don't invest in Aberdeen. So right now, like I'm in my office in Aberdeen, but like it's a really nice lifestyle because we live close by. The in-laws live close by. Like all the playgrounds and parks are all dotted around us, so it's quite nice that way. But it does mean I'm on the road a lot. up and down to Lanarkshire. I invest in student houses in Sunderland as well.
Yeah.
So I'm on the road a lot, but having the right people in place makes a massive difference as well. So yeah, I still don't invest in Aberdeen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to know. 'Cause I mean, you're sticking to your guns at least. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to hear. And what in particular sort of attracted you to Lanarkshire at the time? You know, because obviously you picked that as your area to invest in.
Yeah, so again, I saw invested in Aberdeen as all your eggs in one basket. You
Hmm.
know, the economy in Aberdeen is very much driven by the price of a barrel of oil. And when the barrel of oil is low, demand for housing and rental property goes to the floor in Aberdeen. And again, being an engineer, I've only ever worked in high risk industries. So like making an error is you just don't, like you really don't. Because it generally means someone gets killed or someone gets very badly injured. So with that mindset, I just couldn't do that. I couldn't have my investments, especially because I'm spending other people's money. Like I take that much more seriously than spending my own money. And like I would literally sell the shirt off my back to pay back investors if something ever went wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I had all my investments or all their money in one city, which is volatile, I just wouldn't sleep at night. So going down to Lanarkshire, like across the M8 and down the M74, you've got so many towns. You've got Airdrie, Wishaw, Hamilton, Motherwell, Bellshill, Coatbridge. You've got all these towns that are small towns, but they've all got a train station. They've all got amazing transport links to Edinburgh and Glasgow. There's lots of different industries there. The prices are amazing. Like what you can buy a 2 and 3 bed house for in Lanarkshire is you wouldn't buy a 2 bed flat in Aberdeen for it.
Mm,
But the
yeah.
rents are still as strong, so the
Okay.
yields are massive. So the stability of the market was what attracted me, and the amount of stock available.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Um, and then now that you're back in Aberdeen, so you're ultimately kind of you said obviously you're traveling quite a lot, but you're
Yeah,
investing from a distance as well. So what sort of challenges do you have in regards to that? Because me, I invest in my sort of local town, local city, sorry, and then if you need to, you can just nip up there in half an hour and just check on the builder, or
yeah.
So what sort of challenges do you have investing from afar?
Very obvious ones, I suppose. It's like you said, you're just not there. So I'm having to be very creative about how I find deals now, because like a lot of deals would come from not even like your actual property viewings.
Yeah.
It's like at the weekend when you're going for a walk with somebody, or you're meeting somebody somewhere, or it's your social thing. Oh, you walk past a street you've never seen before, and oh, there's an empty house over there. Like that's where a lot of the stuff came from. And
Okay.
even like you can see, if because I keep track of every property I've ever bought or sourced or refurbed or whatever. And like when I moved there, they're literally, you could draw a circle around where I lived, and they're all within like a 5 mile radius because I was there so often. So like proximity to your area is a huge benefit. So because I'm not there now, the knowledge that I had of the area is coming into play a lot. And also, I don't use estate agents to find deals as much. Well, number one, because it's harder because there's less stock. But
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not there, so I can't be knocking on their door every second week, or I can't view the same volume anymore either. So like, if I speak to an estate agent and they're like, "Oh, we've got a property coming to the market. Do you want to view it before it comes to the market?" I'd love to, but I can't get there until next Wednesday. So by that time, it's gone. You know what I mean? It's been on the market, sold, and I'm not even there yet.
Yeah.
So like doing things like social media marketing and direct to vendor marketing is much more important to me now than it used to be. And also having people in the area that can go and view a property if I'm not there
Okay.
is very important. And even I'm changing my agent in Sunderland as well, because they were working out when I was there. Because again, Sunderland's only 3 hours from Glasgow, but it's a 6.5 hour drive from Aberdeen. So again, I'm not
Yeah.
going to nip down there, And because I'm not there, they're not performing. So I'm having to change that, which was a big decision and very difficult to find someone who was up to the job. And but now that I have, I'm comfortable to start investing there again. So there is challenges, but again, it makes you better at what you do to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, okay, that's great to hear. And then Sunderland, then why Sunderland? So you're investing in student lets there, are you?
Yeah, it's a university town.
Hmm.
It's close to Scotland. Basically, is one of
Yeah.
the obvious reasons. And again, the numbers just they work. It's quite a small area. So it's just student houses because again the cash flow really well. The HMOs cash flow really well. And it's again there's a lot going on in Sunderland. It's not just, even though like there is a Nissan factory who's a big employer, there's
Yeah.
still other things going on there. Hospitals and a lot of regeneration going on. Like there's millions been spent in Sunderland in the last 3 or 4 years. So I think the prices are only going to go up. So it's potential for capital growth there as well. So yeah,
Yeah, that's really
I like
interesting.
Sunderland. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah. What sort of size HMOs are you operating down there?
Again, being an engineer, I'm very systemized. I've got a very specific strategy. I only work with 4-bed HMOs.
Okay.
So everything I do has to have an exit strategy or even multiple exit strategies, because unfortunately I've got an engineering brain which I can't switch off. I've learned how to think as an engineer basically. So I think the biggest difference between an engineer starting a business and a normal human starting a business is we're trained to think about when things go wrong, because everything we design as an engineer, you need to look at it. When it fails, how is it going to fail? Do we need to make it double the size it should be in case it fails? So I'm always looking at what can go wrong. And if in the unlikely circumstance the university shuts down tomorrow, if I've got 10 and 12 bed HMOs, what the hell do I do with them?
Yeah.
Like literally, you're not going to sell them as a residential house, are you? You're not going to rent them to a family and make money on it. They're just, the
No.
mortgage is too big. So by only having 4-bed houses, if I ever need to rent it to a family, it'll just about work. If I need to sell it as a residential house, I can do that. It's just a matter of taking the fire doors out, taking out the fire alarm system and boarding it up, and it's pretty much a residential house. So 4 beds is where I'm at.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. That's really interesting to hear. And speaking to a lot of engineers, kind of think very similar to yourself. But also, I think it works really well for property investors being an engineer as well. So,
I think
uh,
it's pros and cons. It's
yeah,
good because you like to understand how everything works, understand the detail of what your insurance policy says, what your mortgage policy says. But on the flip side, trying to actually run a business initially is hard because you're so used to having processes and different things in place. And basically, with an engineering design, you can't execute it until it's finished, until you know how it's going to finish. Whereas in business, quite often you don't know the end result. You just have to roll the dice, and that's hard to get your head around initially as well.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Well, talking about starting a new business then, so you obviously decided to invest in property and that to be a full-time business. It'd be interesting to kind of know your thoughts on that, because a lot of investors will invest in property sort of as a wealth sort of preservation, and obviously, hopefully they can appreciate over
Yeah.
time as well, but they'll kind of usually create the income through another source and then invest in property. But you kind of just jumped right in and went straight for property. So it'd be interesting to kind of see why you decided to go for property.
Um, Again, it was if I knew when I was 20 years old, if I knew what I know now, that's what I would have done. Alongside my engineering career, I'd have been picking up buy to lets left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Even if it was one a year, even if it was one every 2 or 3 years, that's what I would have been doing. Um, but because I'm turning 40 this year, motorsport is a massive passion of mine, and I basically want to be able to compete in motorsport. That's why I started a business, as well as having like the
Okay.
security and the freedom. I want the financial security to be able to compete in motorsport. In fact, well, you can't really see it, but that's a picture of a rally car right over my head there. That's what motivates me. Obviously, since then, I have a family now, and family security is tops everything. But still, like rallying is what drives me to make more money. I would be happy and have financial security for my family at a certain level, and I get to that, and that'll, but what will drive me to the next level is to compete in motorsport. And I realized I was never going to have that at the level I wanted to in a job working
Yeah.
as an engineer. But yeah, if I was to go back and start again, I would be picking up properties, and the properties would be paying for the rallying by now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, great tip. Yeah, and I'm sure rallying is going to be an expensive hobby as well, right?
Yep. Yep. There's no way around that. It's an expensive hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, and you mentioned sort of family life there as well, and you've kind of I've seen this. You mentioned this before as well. That's changed you as a property investor as well. You even mentioned earlier on that you kind of had sort of engineering mindset, and it's just purely about the numbers for you.
Mhm.
How have you changed your strategy now? Now that you're a family man as well.
The biggest thing is time. I have such an appreciation for time that I never had before because family is really important to me. And like not missing out on my kid growing up is very important to me. And like I start my days at 5 o'clock in the morning, and not because the miracle morning tells you to. It's because I want to be home. Like I'm basically back in my house by 3 p.m. most days.
Excellent.
So like I've got my day's work done by what most people call lunchtime, and the reason for that is family time. So like there's so many Zoom calls and meetings that I'm just not available for because it's family time, or it's putting the kid to bedtime. Um, that's really the biggest change in me. And every time, like I'm looking at a new strategy just now of building new build houses, and my reservation is this going to take up all my time? Am I about to step into something that means I no longer get to see my family? And if it is, then either one of two things: either I need to figure out how to do it differently, or who to get involved so that doesn't happen, or I'm not doing it. Whereas before, I would just worked more and more and more, and I used to do very long days, and you actually end up being non-productive in the end. You're working so much, but I work much more consistently now, much more systemized. I've got more people involved in the business, because my time is very precious now.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that you've kind of realized that, whilst your children are still young. Yeah, because
Mhm.
often we kind of regret it as they get older because that time goes so quickly and it is finite. You can't get that time back, unfortunately.
I've heard a lot of people say that, and I've
Yeah,
never, you never listen to that kind of stuff until you actually have a
no,
family. But now, as soon as you do, and someone says that to you, actually realize like it's like she's two now, and you know what I mean. Like I can't believe how fast that's gone. But the fact that I actually know her, you know what I mean? Like I know what she likes to watch on TV. I know what storybooks she likes to read before she goes to bed. I know what snacks she likes. You know what I mean? That's really
yeah,
important to me because that's you
yeah,
don't get that back. Like, and nobody can
no,
tell you that. You either know it or you don't.
no, it's excellent. Yeah, it's priceless. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you talked about new builds. I know you've got a huge sort of passion about new builds. And actually, Sonny Palmer's watching just now, and he commented. So, as your qualified engineer, he says the understanding of engines, you'd be very well equipped to do new build developments. So,
Mhm.
um, why are you so passionate about new builds? About learning about them, and maybe kind of doing new builds yourself.
It is funny because like I did a civil engineering degree, my first degree, and I worked as a civil engineer, but it was on a massive commercial development. It was a new shopping center, and it was our part of the works was a 5-story underground car park underneath the train station. Um, and it was for a company that were not the best company to work for. And I had a really bad experience where they forged my signature on some documents that they were cutting corners on,
Wow.
and I literally just I forgot my measuring tape, and I went back across the site and I saw the guys digging a hole that wasn't mentioned in the meeting, and they were sending guys down into the trench without supporting the trench. Um, and I just said, "What the hell are you guys doing? You're taking your life in your own hands doing that." I said, "Show me your permit to dig," and my name was on it. I just literally I had enough. Like I got, the whole industry just sickened me at that point. Um, and there's actually the same company did the same thing on a different site a week later, and 4 guys got killed doing it. So
Wow.
it was a big thing. Whereas I think if I had to work for a smaller house builder at the time, I might have had a very different experience and a very different life. Um, but circling back to it now with all my life experience and my engineering experience, I love it. Like I can't believe how much I love it. Like I'm actually sitting here. There's 4 books sitting behind me about building new houses, and I just can't read enough about it. I can't speak to enough people about it, and I just think my personality is better suited to it. Um, I do really enjoy being a landlord, but only to a point. It's not something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
I do tend to. There's only so many block drains I'm happy to pay for, and you know what I mean. And just like, come on, and I like the thought of owning 200 buy to lets. Like that would just stress me out. It's 200 houses you have to maintain. It's 200, silly little problems that I don't have the patience to deal with. Um, And while I'm a good landlord, my properties are in very good condition. Some of them are in better condition than my own house. I just don't think on a larger scale I'm of the personality for that. Whereas new builds is much more clinical. It's much more like groundworks, and the hard work is getting the house out of the ground.
Yeah.
Once the foundations are in, it's not too different from a refurb really. Um, and I actually have a lot of experience in groundworks. Like I put myself through university and through school, working in my uncle's quarry, driving diggers and driving loaders and digging holes and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
the groundwork side of the things, experience that I didn't even realize would be important later in life, is now
Yeah.
actually quite good. So that's kind of why I'm heading towards new builds. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we're watching that space.
Yeah, definitely.
Good, good. You'd mentioned even just now about education, and this can be a common theme all the way through today. And you got property training sort of back in 2015, and I suppose maybe at that time, there's probably a lot of uncertainty as well because you'd lost your first job, and
Mhm.
with your transition to the second one, and probably that wasn't, sort of guaranteed as well. So, what made you sort of get some property education as well? Because that's a question that probably comes up quite often with you, and definitely with me as well. And I can't really comment because I've not had that sort of property
Yeah.
education, sort of formal education. So, it'd be great to get your take on that.
I suppose at the time, I know I make myself sound really old here now, and 2015 isn't really that long ago, but
No,
in 2015 there just wasn't the same availability of knowledge online that there is now. I mean, there's so many books and podcasts and networks that you can join now that just didn't exist back then.
yeah,
Um, and I knew I wanted to do this seriously. I don't really get involved in something that I'm going to do half-assed. Um, I'm either doing it or I'm not, and I'm very singular in my focus as well. And obviously, the thought of using other people's money to do it, like there was no way I was just going to throw a dart and randomly try and make it stick. So getting educated was very, very important to me. I've always kind of had that attitude. I've seen in the past the success I've had from learning something from the ground up. So it just wasn't an option to do anything other than get trained to do it properly. And
yeah,
I'm not I'm not very good at learning remotely. I'm not very good at learning from books. Like if I know, I'd rather go and speak to three people about a new topic and learn from them, and then top up the knowledge with books. Like online courses and all that just doesn't suit me. All the information could be there for free. I'll never learn it. I need to go and sit in front of a human and ask them loads of questions, and that's just how I learn best.
yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, yeah, it's definitely worked for you.
Mhm.
Um, you kind of mentioned earlier on, like you'd ask all you sort of your friends and family, what you're best at. So what do you find you're best at when it comes to property investment?
That's a good question. Um, there was two things that were the strongest teams, and the first one was getting stuff done. And it is funny, like I didn't. It sounds like a very wishy-washy thing to say, but it is true, and I didn't realize I was good at that until it was pointed out to me. And even when I look back in my career, every engineering company I'd ever worked for, my biggest success was the exact same, and I never realized that. And every time, so in each company, when something went really badly wrong, they sent me in to fix it,
Yeah,
and I did. Like there was one project where there was three engineers working on it for 2 years, and they didn't get the solution, and I worked on it for a month by myself, and I fixed it. Like I just got stuff done. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I didn't get caught up in the politics of it, or I wasn't there to blame somebody. I just wanted to know what went wrong, why it went wrong, and just how to fix it. And I just seemed to cut through all the stuff and just get to the problem. And the second one was trust, like gaining people's trust was something I was very strong at. And again, I wouldn't even said that was a skill, but apparently it is. And again, for each of those projects, I gained people's trust really quickly because I wasn't there to assign blame or to make me look good. I was there to literally find out what went wrong. And like people are smart. Like if there's been a big incident and you're coming in, like people suss you out very quickly. And when you're not
mm,
there trying to assign blame, you're speaking to the guys in the ground and you're like, and they say this is what happened. And you start saying stuff like, right, tell me how. And you take an interest and you actually go and visit the thing and see what broke and how it broke and who was fixing, who was working on it at the time. So gaining people's trust, because and the reason for that is because I just care. Like I don't do something I don't care about. So gaining people's trust was a really big one, and just getting stuff done was the second one.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Right. Okay. Well, yeah, that was really interesting to hear in regards to that. What about your future goals when it comes to property investment? I know obviously you've got a passion and new builds, but where do you kind of see your business going from now into the future?
As I said, new builds is kind of a direction that I'm heading in, but more reliance on other people is something I'd like to introduce as well. I'm still very much the guy running everything, which obviously is the way things have to start.
Yeah.
Um, but I have an assistant now as well, which makes a big difference, and I need to even learn to rely on that person more. But yeah, getting better systems in place, um, focusing more on the things that matters the most in the business. So finding deals and raising finance are pretty much the only two things I should be doing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Um, and the marketing and lead generation side of the business absolutely fascinates me. Um, I never thought it would, and it's probably something I ignored for too long in the business as well. But I'm really getting into marketing, and I'm still kind of running that a bit too much. I'd rather just be the guy just thinking of it, or having someone else. Yeah, just giving people rough ideas and them run with it type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, working on that a lot more as well. Lead generation and marketing is a really fascinating side of the business.
Yeah. Such a powerful tool as well. If
Mhm.
if you can get it to work right for you. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what runs the business. If you've no input of flow of deals or acquisition plans or whatever, like you don't have a business. So it's
Yeah.
critical.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's
Yeah,
kind of transferable to any business, really, isn't it? Because you can be great at what
100%.
you do. If nobody knows what you do, then you're not gonna have a successful business, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about property investment, a big sort of difficulty that we've had in the last year or so, a couple of years even, is the availability of deals as well. How have you kind of overcome that in your own business?
Again, just um, expansion of pipelines, marketing and lead generation, as we've just said.
Yeah.
Before COVID, I literally had one way of getting deals, and that was through estate agents.
Hmm.
Whereas now I have seven, and there are various different methods, and none of them are going to make me a millionaire. But even if each one of them brings me in one deal a year, then that's seven deals. So that's a good year for us.
Yeah.
Um, so it's definitely it's made me a lot smarter about how we find deals, and I think if you can survive in this market and come out the other side, then there's nothing going to phase you. You can survive anything because
Uh,
stock levels are very low now, but it is just part of the property cycle. If you look at the property cycle, it's coming up towards a boom. It's just all the traits are there, all the signs are there. This happens every 10, 15, 18 years. So it's something that we'll all have to live through. So there's no point in just making excuses and saying deals are hard to find. You either find a different type of deal or you get better at finding deals yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, great, Paul. Thank you. And what sort of pain points do your clients typically have? You mentioned one there, where the
Mhm.
client, was just sort of grateful for the fact that you didn't judge them. I'm sure there'll be lots of different sort of pain points. Is there any sort of common pain point, why they maybe kind of use your services over kind of going on to the open market?
It's very varied, but generally there's some kind of financial issue, and it's not usually about the finance. So like that guy had a debt issue in the past, which it transpired he actually couldn't sell his property for a certain period of time because it would just
Yeah,
be used to pay off previous debts and stuff. Um, it's really difficult to say. I suppose that's kind of part of the skill of what I do is I listen to what the person's problem is, because sometimes buying their property off them isn't solving their problem. It might just be giving them a bit of advice, or there might be just something very basic that they're not aware of. Um, so just listening to people, really. Everyone I've worked with has had different issues. Some of it's just they want to sell like one, for example, was a bit of an unusual one. It was the first time I'd worked with directly with a vendor, and it was two brothers, and their dad had passed away, and they'd been left the family home, and it was a flat in Wishaw, and the dad knew that the two guys would fall out over the property,
right.
So he put a clause in the will that from the date they got it, they had 12 months to decide what they were going to do with it, i.e., who was going to keep it or what was going to happen. And it was coming up to the 12 months. Like literally, I got a phone call on a Thursday, and the 12 months ended on the Monday, and they had fallen out over it. So they needed to sell it because they weren't going to resolve it between the two of them. One of the brothers had decided to refurb it himself, but he had no skills in that area, and he ripped it apart and then realized he had no idea how to put it back together. So he was
Right.
living in the property with his two boys, and like when I went to visit the property, they were doing the dishes in the bath because they had no kitchen.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And they knew what they wanted for it because it was in poor condition because they'd ripped it apart. So like it wasn't like I was standing there negotiating with them. It was a case of yes or no, can I help you?
Yeah.
And they just wanted the thing sold, and they needed it sold before the Monday. They needed to be able to go to their solicitor and prove that they were selling it. So that worked for us, and we bought the property, and that solved their problem. But quite often it's not as straightforward as that. So like another one was just really simple stuff that people just don't pick up on when they don't listen properly. There's a guy selling a flat, um, and he needed a certain amount for the property, and it was just over the 40 grand mark because that's what his mortgage was. And everyone was offering him 39, 500, 39, whatever, to get under the stamp duty threshold.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't working. It was on the market for like 10 months, and it was an estate agent that I didn't have a great relationship with. They don't like investors, basically. They think they're a waste of time. But I went in anyway and just said, have you got any properties, blah, blah. And she was like, go and look at this flat. We just can't seem to sell it. I don't really know what's wrong. And it was the owner that was viewing it because he was living there.
Yeah.
And I went up and saw the flat. It was a really nice flat. It wasn't in very bad condition. It was a bit dated, but it was in really good condition. And just from chatting to the guy, I was sitting in the living room, and I was trying to think, what can we do here? Like I was listening, and he mentioned about the couches and stuff because they're really expensive couches. His previous boss, when he retired, his boss gifted him a couch and a leather chair that were really expensive. And I was like, how did you get them in here? Like, how are you getting them out? Because they were huge. Like, they weren't like too big for the room, but like you weren't carrying them down the stairs.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, we're just going to leave them because we can't get them out. When we got them in, he's like, the boss paid for a teleporter, and they removed the front window of the property, and because it was a first floor flat, and they teleported it into the property, which
Right.
obviously they weren't going to do to reverse it out. So I was like, why don't I buy the couch off you? He was like, what? I was like, why don't I buy the couch off you? And then that'll give you what you need financially. And then I don't pay the stamp duty on the property, and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
He's like, brilliant, let's do that then. Like, I couldn't believe that property was on the market for 9 or 10 months and no one said that to him. Like, just
Yeah.
simply buying the couch solved his problems. And it was as simple as that. You know what I mean? So it can be
Amazing.
anything. It can be something really big, or it can be something really, really small. If you just listen carefully, you'd be surprised what you can pick up from people.
Yeah. That's a great tip, Paul. Thank you. Yeah. And do you see any current trends, or maybe, or are you transitioning your business in the property investment business in any way, based on sort of the current sort of market, where we've got sort of interest rates sort of rising slightly at the moment, inflation's obviously sky high, and I think there will be kind of opportunities available with in regards to that as well, and upcoming EPC regulations as well. Is there anything in particular that you're kind of got your eye on, or you're transitioning your business towards at the moment?
Again, being an engineer and being kind of always wanting to be belt and braces with everything,
Yeah.
I've kind of prepared for the EPC stuff when I was doing refurbs, from 2017 onwards.
Well.
Even my HMOs in Sunderland, because they're 4 bed, they don't need to be licensed. You need a license for 5 beds and above. So I don't actually need fire doors. I don't need fire lights. I don't need fire detection systems, but I have them in there anyway because at some point they're going to need a license. So it's already
Yeah.
there in place. So all my properties already have the appropriate EPC ratings, and I made sure I could do that before I bought them. As regards inflation and all that, like, yeah, that's the scarcity of property is definitely a thing. But like I said, we're putting measures in place to get better at finding deals. The big shift in that for me is private investment, because you've got other investors who want to invest in property but can't find the deals either.
Yeah.
So they still want to invest their money. So they're starting to invest with me now because they see I'm still active. I'm still doing what I'm doing. The price of inflation, I talk about a lot on my social media because from an investor's point of view, if you have £100,000 sitting in your bank account, and I know they're advertising inflation as around 6%, but we all know it's closer to 10, if not 12. Like it's
Yeah,
massive.
easy. Yeah.
The price of baby milk, the price of nappies, the price of fuel, the price of everything is going through the roof just now. So if you have 100 grand sitting in the bank today and inflation's at 10%, you can only buy 90 grand's worth of stuff this time next year. Like your money is literally eroding away in a bank
Yeah.
account. And people know that. People who have funds in the bank know that. So they're looking for something to do with it. And normally they would probably go and buy a house or whatever, but they can't buy them now. So it's working well for me from that point of view because investors are looking to get their capital deployed, and they're using us to do that. But again, it's all just part of the cycle. You know, in
Yeah.
another year or 2 or 3's time, it'll be the opposite. There'll be property abundance of property to buy, and it'll be hard to find money to fund them. So that's just where we are, and lenders are desperate. Even the banks are desperate to get their money out the door. Like they're cutting interest rates left, right, and center, as you well know,
Yeah.
to get their money deployed. And I was even speaking to a hedge fund manager recently and asking him where he's getting his funds, and he's like banks, because it sounds really weird, but the banks don't even keep their own money in the bank. You know, a bank
That's
with
right.
money in the bank is a bad bank because their money is eroding as well. So they go to hedge fund managers, and you know, when you put your savings in the bank, it's not sitting there waiting for you; it's deployed somewhere else, earning money. You know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's often something that we don't realize. Sort of how sort of fractional reserve banking works. And
Mhm.
actually, yeah, your money isn't actually sitting there. It's obviously kind of
Yeah,
invested out, isn't it? So if everybody wanted to try to take out all the money out at once, they couldn't, and that's obviously what happened in 2008. So.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're right. Definitely about inflation, though. A lot of people do know about it, but not everybody does. It's a silent killer as well. It kind of just
yeah,
creeps up on you over time, doesn't it? So before you know it, your money's worth a lot less. So it can
yeah,
work for you as well, especially when it comes to property investment. But if your money's just sitting there as cash, like you said, it's just eroding away, unfortunately.
totally.
And and definitely at a higher rate just now. I agree with you. It definitely is kind of much higher than what the government's saying
Yeah.
it's at. We can feel it in our own pockets, can't we?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
feel it filling up my fuel tank driving to Lanarkshire.
Yeah, definitely for you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right, Paul, that's been really good today. I've got a lot of golden nuggets myself off the call. I think your sort of your ethics, your sort of how open you've been actually all the way through as well. Even about your mistakes that you've made has been really sort of humbling as well. Where can people find you? Online, and how can people work with you?
social media is probably the easiest way to find me. I'm on Instagram most of the time. UK Property Man, that's where that name comes from. That's my Instagram name, which I use across all social media platforms. But Instagram is the easiest and quickest way to get to me. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And maybe just a quick plug for our event as well. So me and Paul also run a property event in Dundee. It's once a month on the first Wednesday of each month. So if you want to chat with Paul, feel free to come down to one of those in the near future as well.
Yeah, definitely. They're going really well, and there's a consistent crowd turning up them, so it's a really good event. And what I would say as well is, if people want to reach out to me on Instagram, like please do. I know I said I'm very precious about my time, but I do make time in my week to chat to people, and if I can help people at all, I always do. So don't be afraid to drop me a message and say hello.
Excellent, Paul. Paul, that's been really, well, it's really nice offer of you as well. Thank you for that. And yeah, for all the viewers today, I hope you found that enjoyable as well. And we'll catch up again with you soon.
Yep, good. Thanks, Kesser. Thanks to your audience. Cheers.
Okay, take care.